Well, good morning. Everybody anxious to get out of the house? That's good. Huh? Good to see everybody. We're going to continue on with our look at the Sermon on the Mount and the idea of being kingdom people. I want to just kind of hit a little bit of what we did last week on the video and just kind of hit the high points. Is the part where Jesus said, "Don't think that I've come to abolish the law." Right? Don't think that I've come to abolish the law and the prophets. I've not done that. I've come to fulfill them. Right? Until heaven and earth pass away, not the smallest letter or the least stroke of the pen will by any means disappear from the law till all things are fulfilled. Right? So whoever breaks the least of these commandments and teaches others to do the same will be called least in the kingdom. Whoever teaches and practices even the least of these commandments will be called great. Then that big shocking statement of unless your righteousness exceeds that of the Pharisees and the teachers of the law, you will not enter. And that has got to shock those people. But we the lesson last week was kind of talked about what the purpose of the law was. Jesus didn't come to get rid of it. He came to show us what the purpose was. We have kind of a love-hate relationship sometimes with the law of, that's not something we need to worry about, but it seems that Jesus is okay with saying, yes, we do. So we kind of have to wrestle with that. And so we kind of look at this, when we start thinking about this, the purpose of the law given to Israel was that it formed Israel into a particular kind of people. Right? The problem, however, became that the law seemed to stop at the hands. You see that? It stops on the outside. It stops at the extremities. And we're going to talk about that as we move on into this. But the law is set up as a guide to say this is the kind of people you ought to be. This is different than the people who are around you. I mean, over and over when the law is first given, this is how the people lived in Egypt. This is how the people live in Canaan. You're not going to be like that. And so here are the boundaries. And I think the goal of the law was not that Israel continue to stay out on the boundaries of them and keep running into them, but to become people where those boundaries really didn't matter because we didn't even think about them. Right? It wasn't going to be a question of, well, did you kill anybody today? It was to be formed into people who wouldn't even think that, right? Who would be completely different and opposed to that completely. So this morning we're going to get into the first of these where Jesus really lays this out of saying, here's what it means to see the law fulfilled. Right? You've heard that it was said, do not murder. And whoever murders will be subject to judgment. But I say, whoever's angry with your brother is subject to judgment. Again, whoever says to your brother, Raka, is answerable to the Sanhedrin. Whoever says to your brother, you fool, is in danger of the fire of hell. So then, if you're offering your gift at the altar, and there you remember that your brother has something against you, leave your gift, go be reconciled with your brother, then come and offer your gift. Settle matters quickly with your adversary who is taking you to court. Do it with him while you're still on the way, or else he will hand you over to the judge. The judge will hand you over to the officer, and the officer will throw you into prison. I tell you the truth, you will not get out until you've paid the last penny. I love the way Randy Harris deals with some of this in his book, Living Jesus, where Jesus says, do not murder. And I go, I feel pretty good. Right? I haven't killed anybody all day. But Jesus goes, that's fine. How's your anger? And that's more of a problem. Right? That's more of a problem. So there's lots of things I want to kind of look at in here as Jesus starts moving this from this outer righteousness where it's, okay, at least I didn't kill him, right, to more of what it means to be the person he's called us to be. So there's a lot of things in this that I want us to take a look at, and I think there's a lot that ties back into what he had just got through saying about your righteousness exceeding that of the Pharisees and the teachers of the law. And I want to draw our attention to this first part of the name calling. All right? Um, apparently, and I don't know this. This is just what I've heard in several different places that I've read. Apparently, this term that he uses, raka, is something that is not a family-friendly word, right? This is really derogatory. That this is how you refer to somebody else. And Jesus says, you're answerable to the court if that happens. And then he goes on to say, even, you fool. And so sometimes we get hung up in this, and I don't think I'm not knocking this, by the way. That we go, okay, all right, oh man, I was driving and this guy cut me off and I said, get out of the way, you idiot, right? Okay, I'm the only one that's done that. Okay, all right, good to know. All right, but it hits us and we go, okay, hang on a minute, did I just, and in a way, yes, I did, right? It goes a little bit deeper than that. So I want us to think about this idea of name calling for just a minute. Jesus uses a couple here. There are a lot of others. There are a lot of others that sneak their way into to our language now. Before I get to that, I want us to notice this whole idea of what he talks about with name calling and the scribes and Pharisees for just a second. It's in John chapter 7. One of those great passages where we have this John gives us this view of what the Jewish leadership is up to. John chapter 7, Jesus has come back to Jerusalem for the Feast of Tabernacles, one of the many feasts that he comes back to attend. And he's teaching. The Pharisees have sent the temple guard. They want him arrested. And the temple guard comes back empty-handed. As they start talking about this and going, what we're trying to do with this guy, we need to get rid of him, Nicodemus pipes up. And Nicodemus we met back in John chapter 3, who has come to Jesus, and he's starting to kind of think about who Jesus is. And Nicodemus says, listen, in our law, aren't we supposed to hear the other person before we condemn him? And they looked at Nicodemus and they said, so are you a Galilean too? Right? If we can label Nicodemus, then he's less than human. As those same religious leaders, and I believe that's still in John chapter 7, talk about the people who they are supposed to be shepherding. Right? The people that they are supposed to be guiding in the law, they refer to them as just these people who know nothing about the law. They refer to them with contempt because they're not quite where the scribes and Pharisees are. And I wonder if this is John kind of illustrating Jesus' point in the Sermon on the Mount of going, here's what the righteousness of the scribes and Pharisees looks like. And here's what you're supposed to be. Another place, Matthew chapter 11. Matthew chapter 11 is another one of those discussions that Jesus has with the Jewish leadership. Let's just look at it real quick. When we're talking about John the Baptist, let's go to verse 11 of chapter 11. Jesus speaking to them now, speaking to the crowds. Truly I say to you, among those born of women, there has arisen no greater than John the Baptist. Yet the one who's least in the kingdom of heaven is greater than he. From the days of John the Baptist until now, the kingdom of heaven has suffered violence, and the violent take it by force. For all the prophets and the law prophesied until John. If you're willing to accept it, he is Elijah who is to come. He who has ears to hear, let him hear. Right. But to what shall I compare this generation? It's like children sitting in the marketplace and calling to their playmates. We played the flute for you, and you did not dance. We sang a dirge, and you did not mourn. For John came neither eating nor drinking, and they said, he has a demon. And the Son of Man came eating and drinking, and they say, look at him, a glutton and a drunkard, a friend of tax collectors and sinners. Yet wisdom is justified by her deeds. John came. He's ascetic, right? I mean, he's one of those, he lives in the wilderness, camel's hair, and wild honey, locusts and wild honey, the story we all know. And they said, there's something wrong with that guy. See, he's demon-possessed. You don't need to worry about him. But here comes Jesus, and he's the opposite. You don't need to pay attention to him because, see, he's a glutton and a drunk. They label to dehumanize. If they can label Jesus, and they do this over and over. They do it here. They'll do it later where they said that we were correct to say that you're a Samaritan and have a demon. That's in John 8. That they can marginalize him and do with him what they want because he's no longer human. That make sense? Okay. Now we see this, and we see Jesus saying, okay, here's where this starts. It's not murder that starts this. It's how we're thinking about people to begin with. And we're going to get to and talk about anger in just a second, but it's how we think about people and then how we refer to them that's next. That's the next step. And if we can call them something, if we can group them, we can categorize them, we can say things about them, then we can do with them what we want because they're not really us. Now, this begins to get a little closer to home, doesn't it? This really begins to stare us in the face. When we go, we don't need to pay attention to them. Think about the name calling that goes on. I mean, think about it right now. Just think about the name calling that goes on in America, particularly in American politics. Do we have any name calling going on? Okay, again, I'm the only one that's heard it. Okay, all right, good. Right? But it's there. We don't have to worry about what those people want. They're right-wing conservative nuts. Nazis, fascists. We can go that way. Or we can go, they are socialists, communists, Democrat, liberal, progressive, whatever we want to call them, but we can lump them in, and now we don't have to treat them like they're somebody. They're a label now. And this didn't just show up now. This has been going on for a long, long time, back to the time of Jesus and even before, right? We can label these people. Book of Ruth. Take some time to read the book of Ruth and see how many times Ruth is referred to as Ruth the Moabite. That's her identity. As far as Israel is concerned, she's a Moabite, which makes her less than Israel. Right? Think about the way we do that. Think about the ugly ways that we have done that. Not that any of them are particularly attractive, but real ugly ways that we've done that. Language that is now looked at of going, wait a minute, you need to pay attention to this because it's insensitive, it's very sensitive language. And sometimes we go, okay, hold on a minute, we're getting a little carried away with these safe words, right? Or trying to protect everybody from speech. But do we realize what those words meant? Right? The N-word was a way of dehumanizing people. They're no longer people. Our entire nation, right, fought the Civil War over whether or not people are people or whether they're less than human. And if we can make them less than human, then we can do what we want with them. And that's where Jesus goes with this. It's not murder that's the problem. Murder is the result. The problem is, how do we think about people? The problem is our anger. The problem is that we have anger. And now, James Bryan Smith, in his book, The Good and Beautiful Life, talks about anger. And I think he's got something going for him here. Because the more I think about it, the more you can go, okay, I see this, I see his point. He says that anger results from two things: unmet expectations and fear. Okay? unmet expectations and fear. Now, there's a lot of places we can go with this. I'm going to use his illustration because it works. I think it works very well. He talks about having an appointment to meet a friend. He's going to meet a friend. They're going to go to lunch. He only has a limited amount of time, for this, during the day for this. And so he gets there. He's at the restaurant. He's waiting, and his friend is late. He goes, now, this is where it starts. Huh? They're not here yet. He said he would be here. He said he would be here, and I expected him to be here on time. He's not here. Now there's a problem. He goes, and so that begins to continue to play out. Okay, so even if he shows up, we're not going to be able to have lunch the way I thought we were going to be able to have lunch. Now we're going to have to hurry because I've got to get back to work. And so that unmet expectation keeps playing over. Then it turns into fear. Maybe a fear of, to some degree, of going, okay, maybe he's had trouble, maybe there's a problem, that kind of thing. But the fear that leads to anger that he talks about is going, okay, I'm afraid that maybe I'm not as important to him as I thought I was. I'm afraid that he doesn't think of me as well as he should think of me. Again, unmet expectations and fear. He tells a story about going to being invited to speak, and he has planned out his trip. His brother's going to meet him at the airport. He's planned out his trip to where he's going to go. That way he can get there early. He'll have time to kind of gather himself before he speaks at this conference. And so his brother picks him up at the airport, and they take off down the freeway. I believe they're in California. And they take off down the freeway, and all of a sudden traffic comes to a standstill. And he says, oh my goodness, what am I going to do now? He goes, so I've been looking at my watch, going, okay, now here's when I have to get there, and all this kind of stuff. He goes, I'm beginning to get angry because the traffic's not moving. I don't know what's going on. And here I am again, and now it's going to rush me. I may get there late, not even be able to speak, not even be able to do what I was supposed to do. I may not get there. He goes, and all the time my brother's sitting in the driver's seat just as calm as he can be. Right? And he keeps looking at me and keeps understanding, keeps seeing that I'm getting more and more upset. And so he finally asked me, and I just tell him, I'm like, this traffic is awful. I don't know how I'm going to get there. I don't know why we didn't plan this better, And he goes, his brother said, it's fine. In about 5 minutes, this will all break up. Because his brother knows where they are. He doesn't have unrealistic expectations. He knows exactly how it's going to work. And it works out just that way. But we get in that idea of going, listen, we have expectations of people and they don't meet them. Now we're angry. Again, am I the only one? I'd look back and go, this happened within the last 2 weeks. Right? It's happened to me again. I'm going, why can't I get past this? We're going to talk a little bit about that in a minute. The other one is fear. Fear, a great emotion, by the way. Very, very important to our survival. Right? We need to understand that there are dangers and understand what those dangers are and avoid those dangers so we survive. Make sense? All right. The problem with fear, especially if it's unchecked fear, is that we begin to try to fix the problem and seek control. I was listening to a guy speak, it's been several years back. I remember this because I remember the title of his lesson was The Gospel in 4 Words. And one of those words was control. He said, what we want is security. But when we don't have security and that fear gets a hold of us, we try to exert control to seek security. And he goes, in case you missed it, I remember this part, I just described every military hotspot in the world where we fear the other, and so we try to exert control, which leads to some real problems. fear, where we're afraid that we are not, or things are not going our way. And so we try to exert control over other people who have the same fear that things aren't going their way, who are also trying to exert control, and it leads to conflict. Make sense? Okay, good. I like the nodding as long as it doesn't stay, as long as it's not permanent. Okay? So Jesus says there's a problem here, right? That it's not only the boundary. I'm glad you didn't kill anybody. However, don't let it get there. It starts way further in. And then he goes, because relationships are key. More important, at least in this illustration, than worship. And that strikes me as odd. As someone who has been raised in the church, drugged to church when I was younger, because, let's face it, it wasn't like the top of my list. But this is important. You get to church. You get to worship. And here Jesus says, if you're standing at the altar and you're bringing your gift, and the gift that they're talking about, more than likely, right, is an animal sacrifice. This isn't a cheap gift. This isn't just something that you picked up along the way. This is something you've really taken time to care for, really taken time to make sure you've got the right thing, and you're coming to the altar, and it's there. Just maybe as you're getting ready to step up for the priest to show you, to do what he needs to do so you can kill this animal, that you go, wait a minute. I got a problem with my brother. He said, then leave the gift and go fix it. Leave the gift and go fix it. Then come back. He doesn't say don't do that in place of it, right? Then come back. But this is incredibly important. And I got to ask the question, why? But as we start thinking about all the ways that God has talked to us about his relationship with him and relationship with others, we're going, okay, now it's beginning to make a little more sense. Later on in Jesus' ministry, he's going to be asked, which one of the commandments is the greatest? And he recites the Shema from Deuteronomy. Right? The Lord your God is one. You will love the Lord your God with all of your heart, with all of your soul, with all your mind, with all your strength. Right? But he doesn't stop. Right? And that happens to me a lot. Jesus continues to talk when I've quit listening, but he's still talking. Right? And he says, and the second one is that you love your neighbor as yourself. Because all of the law hangs on these two. You can't have one and not have the other. You can't love God and hate your brother. And John explains that to us incredibly well in his first letter when he says, how in the world can you love God that you have not seen if you hate your brother that you have? Those two things go hand in hand. It's not just about keeping that boundary. It's not just about, oh no, I stepped over the line and I shot him. It's about stopping way before that line ever comes into play. It's about becoming the kind of people that this doesn't enter the mind. These things that Jesus is going to talk about are in a way they kind of build on each other, and we're going to continue on with them in kind of in that way. There's a pretty good relationship here between anger, and what he talks about with anger, and right behind it, lust, is how do you view someone else? Right? How do you view someone else? Do you view them as somebody that you can eliminate? Do you view them as somebody you can use for your own pleasure? Do you use them as somebody you can manipulate when he starts talking about oaths? Do you view them as only the people that you need to care about, or the people that you know? Or the people that are like you? This is going to continue on to where we're going to understand a little bit more about what he says when he says, here's the thing, you've got to be better than the Pharisees and the teachers of the law. So, there's a couple of things that I want to talk about in relation to this, and then we may move on a little bit into the next one. And I realize that this is probably something that we don't, let me just say, in my life we've not talked about this much. And maybe you have in other places, but we haven't talked about this much. And it's one of those spots that I don't know how to word this. One of those spots that sometimes we have a little contention over, and that's not what I'm after. Okay, but I want us to think about something. We've talked about this before within this class. That there are things that I'm going to ask us if we would like to try to deal with this, it kind of goes along with where Jesus is driving, okay? Different disciplines that kind of help to eliminate or to show us a better way, maybe. And this is one, and I say this as sometimes a point of contention, because this is one of those things that we really don't find much about in it really not said much as far as the early church goes. Although I think that there's still some of the things there. So let's just get at it. When we're talking about ideas of unmet expectations and fear that give rise to anger, there's something that I'm going to invite you to try if you want. If you don't, fine. If you do, just let me know. And then maybe when we start the next class, we'll talk about how that worked. Okay? All right. You know, it's nice that we don't have songbooks in here anymore because you can't throw them at me. The practice of Sabbath. Now, I realize that gets touchy, right? Because Sabbath is an Israelite thing. Sabbath is carried over into, like Seventh-day Adventists who say, yes, we're going to do this, and this is every week. I don't think that there's a set day for this, but I'm just going to lay out my case, and then you can do what you want, okay? There are two reasons in Scripture given for the Sabbath, okay? One is seeing God as the Creator. In Genesis, it's mentioned. It's really comes into effect in Exodus, where He says, 6 days you will do your work, you will labor and do your work, but the seventh day you'll rest, because on the seventh day God rested. Right? God, it calls divine creation. Here's my view. Again, you're welcome to take this for whatever it's worth. That when it talks about God resting on the seventh day, is that God enters His creation on the seventh day. Right? Everything is prepared, everything is done, and God enters His creation as the King. And He rests on His throne. Right? Which calls to mind God is the Creator. The second one is that you will keep the Sabbath because the Lord your God brought you out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of slavery. Provision in creation and your deliverance. Now, one of the things that I have a tendency to fear, okay, is that, and again, I may be like a lot of other things, I may be the only one, but that I tend to fear is that old saying, if you want it done right, you got to do it yourself. Do this, it doesn't get done. If I don't take care of all this stuff, then what's going to happen to it? And the practice, the practice of Sabbath for Israel was to say, God's got it. There's not need that you've had from being here created and being delivered that God hasn't handled. And with Israel, it's even maybe even more in their face, because it's God who's fed you, right? It's God who's given you water. It's God who's led you this whole way when you had nothing. For 40 years, you've wandered in the wilderness, right? Your clothes didn't rot, your feet didn't swell. Those kind of things keep coming to mind. It's God He's created you, and He has delivered you, and He can handle it. We can be confident that there's not an expectation that we have that God won't meet. Either in sustaining us, as He has so far, right? Or delivering us. Now, I realize that we don't typically say, we don't go, okay, now we're shutting down, you remember this church, we shut down on Friday night and we don't get back up again until Saturday night, right? I mean, we don't do it that way. But I'm encouraging you to give this a shot. You don't have to, it doesn't have to be just a day you choose. And you don't have to do it, you wouldn't have to do it this week. You can do it next week. It doesn't matter. Just pick a day. And here's some things. And as I was reading through this and thinking about it, and I have some friends of mine who do this, who make this a standard practice. I have trouble with it, okay? I do. And if you don't believe me, Stacy's right here, and you can ask her. I have trouble with it. Right? I don't sit still well. But that you make plans for it, that you understand that this is what you're going to do. You spend that day in resting, enjoying family, those kinds of things. But with the idea of going, I can take my hands off the wheel. Actually, the world's probably in better hands if I'm not trying to drive it. Okay? That's one. You're welcome to try this, or you can go, okay, he's nuts. And you may be close to right. But this is one of those things of going, okay, is this a way to deal with our need for control, which drives anger, which drives us to treat other people in a certain way? If you want to, I'm serious, if you want to give this a try, just let me know, or you can tell me at some other time. And what I'd like to do, at least to start one class, is to go, if you've done this, just to share how it worked out, whether it worked well or whether it didn't. Here's another one, and this one plays in, another one of the disciplines. This plays in several spots, but here's one. And this one's hard. I don't, not to say that trying to practice Sabbath wouldn't be hard, but this one's really hard, is silence. Silence. They usually pair silence and solitude together for a good reason, but silence. And here's what I'm driving at. As Jesus unfolds this for us, and He says, the anger problem that you've got, if this is what you say to your brother, or this is what you call your brother, right, then this is going to be a problem for you. We use words in all kinds of ways. But one of the great ways that we use words, and sometimes to the detriment of ourselves, is to either to exert control or defend ourselves. Right? Most of you know what you know about me because of what I've said. Would you agree with that? When we ask somebody about, we meet somebody, how are you? With words, they tell us. With words, they defend themselves. Think about kids, right? Again, I'm probably the only one that got in trouble when I was a kid. Right? But what do I do to get out of it? I bet I can talk my way out of it, right? If I give them enough information, I give them enough reasons, then it will excuse what I did. One of the ways that we interact with God in this way, and really, I think it's a good demonstration of trust, right? I'm not trying to, I don't have any authority to tell you this is what you have to do every day, right? I just don't have that. I'm just throwing out some ideas and just let you kind of run with it and see what you think. But I want us to think for a minute about the way we pray. That we come to God. Again, you're going to learn from me about what I say, right? We come to God. We thank God for the things He's done for us. We thank Him for all those things. But then we begin to ask, right? Please do this. Good things. Interceding for others, asking for things maybe for ourselves to help us, all of those things, all good things. But we come to Him and we do all of the communicating, right? You're really going to think I'm weird now. Okay, and that's okay. I am. But there's a great little spot in Habakkuk. Habakkuk, I think it's in chapter 2. It's a verse that we know, although we don't know we've memorized it. Habakkuk talks about idols. And he said, talks about the idol, and you set this idol up, and you talk to it, and you talk to it, and you talk to it, and it does nothing. He goes, but the Lord is in His holy temple. Let all the earth keep silent. That when we come, and this is difficult. I don't mind telling you. That when we come to God, the first thing we do is silent. That we set before God defenseless. We make no excuses for what we've done or who we are, but we sit in silence. It's one of those ways of giving up control. Right? It's one of those ways of saying, God, this is yours. Right? I had this, actually I had to do this once, was 24 hours of silence. Right? And it's hard. Okay? It's hard to be silent for 24 hours. Those are just some little things. Little things that we might give it a shot. Because at the end of the day, what Jesus is after, what God's after, is what Jesus explains to us as He starts in with this idea of law is, the law's out there. But there's a purpose to that, and it's to change who you are. To be these kind of people. Not that we're just continually bumping up against that fence, right? That the law doesn't stop at the extremities, but that the law forms us into different kinds of people. I know those two things may sound odd, and they probably are. But there's a couple ideas, and maybe you have others. If we want to give them a shot, we can give them a shot. But what we're after here, right? What we're after is looking at what He says about being people of the kingdom and finding ways to move in that direction. Make sense? All right? All right, let's have a prayer and then we'll close. Father, we love You so much. We're so thankful for the time that You've granted us, for the way that You've provided for us, for allowing us to be here this morning, to allow us to connect with one another, and to really examine what it is that You're after. Father, we're humbled that You want us. We're humbled that You would want to have anything to do with us at all. And we're thankful that of the steps that You've made so that we can have a relationship with You. We're thankful for what you've left for us to find. We're thankful for the laws, not just for their sake, Father, but that you've put them there so that we can be the kind of people that you want. Father, what we want most of all is to be called your people. To be the humanity the way that you wanted it, the humanity the way you designed it. And we see that example in your Son. Help us to follow him. Help us to lean into you and trust in your provision. And thanks for your deliverance. We love you so much. We ask all these things in Jesus' name. Amen.